Hi, I'm Rachael, the Nature Educator, and I'm on the west coast of Vancouver Island, British Columbia, in a town called Tofino, which is on the traditional territories of the Tla-o-qui-aht First Nations and is in the Tla-o-qui-aht Biosphere region. People visit here from all over the world to experience the rugged west coast that Tofino has to offer. There's beautiful sandy beaches, surfing, trails to explore, and beautiful scenery. This area has a diverse range of ecosystems, like the coastal temperate rainforest, mudflats, and the rocky intertidal zone. Let's go explore them together. So here we are in a coastal temperate rainforest in Tofino, British Columbia. Just look around here. It is so wet and lush. Let's see what species we can find. Temperate rainforests have so much biomass, whether they're standing alive trees or fallen dead trees. So all this organic material is part of what makes the soil so rich. So as you can see here, this used to be a tree and now it's a stump. And it's slowly decomposing and creating rich soil to support this entire ecosystem. And this stump is supporting so much life. If you look up here, there's huckleberry plants growing out of the top. And there's also moss growing on the branches, and there's fungus growing out of the roots. So let's check out some of the common tree species we can find in this region, like this western red cedar tree. It has soft, fibrous bark that grows in these lines, and they're an evergreen tree with scaly green leaves. Let's see what other trees we can find around here. So here's another tree you can find in the region, the western hemlock. They have short green needles and small cones. So if you're ever unsure what a tree species is by just looking at the bark, if you look on the ground around the trunk, you'll see clues like these little cones. There are many other tree species you can find in the area, like Douglas fir trees and Sitka spruce. There are many understory plants to see here as well, like this red huckleberry, Tla-o, and this evergreen huckleberry here. And these plants produce berries, which is really important to support the wildlife here. So bears and squirrels and other animals, they rely on these plants for food. This is just a sample of what you can find here in Tofino's coastal temperate rainforests. When you visit here, remember to leave no trace, stay on trail, and respect the plants and animals that call this place home. In Tofino's rocky intertidal zone, which is the area between the lowest low tide and the highest high tide. And there's so many different creatures that live in this environment and are super adapted to these ever-changing conditions. So if we look on these rocks here, you can see there are so many barnacles. So barnacles are creatures that stick themselves onto rocks, so when the waves crash against the rocks, they stay stuck. And they're super adapted to being exposed to the air and submerged under salt water. So when the tide is out and they're exposed to the air, their doors are closed to prevent their bodies from drying out. And then when the tide comes back in and they're submerged underwater, they stick out their feathery foot to capture plankton that's floating by. And if you look closely, you'll see there's such a diversity of different types of barnacles, like thatched barnacles, acorn barnacles, and even gooseneck barnacles. We can see there's lots of California mussels that are attached to the rocks using their byssal threads. Let's take a closer look. So we've come across a tide pool here. So when the ocean comes in and high tide, depressions in the rocks will fill up with salt water, and then when the tide goes back out, these tide pools still remain. So these tide pool creatures are super adapted to changing temperatures. This little tide pool can heat up really quickly. So as we walk away from the rocky intertidal zone, we can look back and see that there's different animals that like to grow in different spots of the intertidal zone. So in the lower region here, you can see there's barnacles and mussels. And then just above that, we see all this rockweed and other seaweeds. each species has a preference as to where they grow in this rocky intertidal zone. So now we're gonna go check out a different ecosystem in Tofino. Let's go. I'm here in the Tofino mudflats, an ecologically significant complex of wetlands and a globally recognized important bird area. And if you look behind me here, you can see that the tide is out, so the mudflats are exposed to the air. And when the tide comes back in, this will all be covered in seawater. So let's go explore this ecosystem and see what we can find. The Tofino mudflats make up 21 square kilometers of wetland and intertidal ecosystems. There are streams flowing fresh water into the bay and the ocean water rising and falling with the tides, making this region super nutrient rich and sheltered for many different animals to live. This ecosystem shows the interconnectedness between the terrestrial and marine environments. Although it may not look like there's much life in the mudflats, beneath the sand, there is an entire community of invertebrates, such as ghost shrimp and crabs. These marine creatures are important prey for other animals in the region, such as raccoons, bears, and the thousands of birds that stop by here on their migration or live here year-round. The Tofino mudflats are globally recognized as an important bird area, and that's because it supports so many different species of birds, including the western sandpiper, where 35,000 of them visit each year. The Tofino mudflats are an ecologically significant area with so much to see. When you visit, make sure not to step on the mudflats to protect the species that call this place home. Here in Tofino, there is so much to explore, like these massive sandy beaches, the rocky intertidal zone, mudflats, and so much more. Thanks for joining me in Tofino, British Columbia, and stay tuned for my future adventures.